Hello, welcome to the third part in the series, Astronomy in the Bible. Today's lesson is on the Star of Bethlehem. The first thing we have to figure out is what kind of story is it? The Bible does have stories of different kinds. Some stories are allegorical, where they may not truly be a literal event, such as, say, Balaam's ass, or Jesus taught in parables. The Good Samaritan is not named, will never go to his house, and the story probably did not really happen as it was stated by Jesus. However, it was told for a theological point, not a documentation of an actual event. The other types of stories, some are miraculous. Miraculous stories, if a star was created for the purpose of hovering over a manger, then we would not be able to find it by looking up at the stars today. The third possibility is that it is a historical event, it is a natural phenomenon, in which case there would be evidence and a good reason to look for it. That is the one type of story we can investigate. To get to the bottom of it, we're going to have to look at a few different types of disciplines: historical astronomy, documented reports, Roman history, and astrology. We have our two primary sources for this story, the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew. So let's start there. The birth of Jesus. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place. Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. Now, the couple of things are, Quirinius was not the governor of Syria at the time of Jesus' birth. Jesus would have been 15 at the time of the crucifixion if Herod was dead over 10 years, and Herod was dead for over 10 years prior to Quirinius taking office. The Bible is, among other things, a historical text written by non-astronomers. They describe a time, a place, and a stellar event, and the text gives clues to the event, what the event was. It does not include a time and date. The historical figures and events referenced are supported by the Roman records and can be used to establish the timeline. Now, according to Matthew, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." So the Magi saw something in the stars that led them to believe that a Savior was born to be King of the Jews. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. The time frame may have been up to 2 years prior to the arrival of the Magi. After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. This proves that non-astronomers make terrible records of astronomical events. Stars just don't do that. It could include that this, or it could mean that this is an allegorical or a miraculous story. Okay. After Herod died, he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. This references the early exile of Jesus and the return to Israel and provides context for the timeline. Herod is known to have died in 4 BC. So who were these people? Herod the Great. Herod the Great was a cruel man. The historian Josephus recorded his life and his works. He is known for murdering rabbis within the temple in order to maintain his power as a king in the Roman Empire. The story that he ordered the murder of all children under 2 years old in the town of Bethlehem is not surprising. Bethlehem was a small town. There may have been a dozen children that age in the town. There is no known record of this order outside of the Bible. Now, he was known Herod the Great because he was a client king of Rome. He was a madman who murdered his own family and a great many rabbis, and he's the evil genius of the Judean nation. He also built cities, brought in aqueducts. For public works, he actually did quite well. Herod Antipas, the next in the story. He is the son of Herod the Great, and his reign lasted up until the crucifixion. He is referenced later in the Bible as presiding over the questioning of Jesus. After being named to the throne by Caesar Augustus upon the death of his father, Herod Archelaus Antipas ruled them as a client state for the Roman Empire. He was responsible for building projects, and more important, the construction of his capital Tiberias in the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Now, Pontius Pilate, 26 to 36 A.D. Pontius Pilate is not related to the Star of Bethlehem, but he is needed to establish the approximate date of the crucifixion. Caesar Augustus. He ruled a fairly long time. Roman records establish the reign from 27 BC to 14 AD. They support that he ordered 3 census in that time frame. Let's see. So when was the census? There were 3 in the reign of Caesar Augustus: 28 BC, 8 BC, and 14 AD. So, how old was Jesus then? Well, Jesus was either 61, 41, or 19 at the time of the crucifixion. That date, April 3rd, 33 AD, I invite you to see the next part of this series, where the date of Good Friday will be established quite solidly as April 3rd, 33 AD. So what was that timeline? So we have the census, marked by the arrows. We have 2 that fit the bill: 28 BC and 8 BC. The other one, Herod is already dead, and Jesus would have been 19 and ineligible to be a rabbi. Historically, the church points to the middle one as the most likely, since Herod, 8 BC, generally considered the best fit. Herod is in office, Jesus is a child, Herod dies, and the family can move back to Israel to follow Herod Antipas' power. This is Jesus in his 30s during his ministry, to be executed at 41. However, strictly speaking, the first census has not been ruled out. So, now astrology and astronomy. In Judaism, there's a prohibition against doing fortune-telling by looking at stars. So, astronomy in Judaism has to do with the calendar. You mark the calendar, you know when the month starts, you know when the Sabbath is, and that is what you use the stars for. So, making prophecies about stars or looking up to the stars to just tell the future was forbidden in Judaism, which would explain why somebody outside of Israel could see the birth announced in the stars, but the people of Israel would not notice. Our solar system, known at the time, we had a geocentric model where we knew the moon was moving the fastest, so it was the closest. Mercury, second fastest to the moon, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, in that order, giving us the 7 heavens. So what kind of observations did they have? Aside from being not suited for fortune telling. The Jewish people knew nothing but warfare and conflict for most all of their history. Stable civilizations give rise to the best astronomers. People in Korea, people in China, all over the world, where they knew peace, astronomy developed, not in Israel. So who were these magi? What do we know about them? We know they were east of Israel. We know that they knew about Judea. They expected a Messiah to be born there, and we know that they were astrologers. Fortunately, we have someone that fits the bill. Zoroastrians originated in Persia. They practiced astrology. They knew of the Jewish people because Jewish people had been captive in Persia. We know from the story of Esther. So that would have also given them access to Jewish literature. Now, Zoroastrians believe that every civilization can have a savior figure. So believing that the Jews had one was not a stretch. They also bear another name, Magiism. So if they were the ones who are out there, what did they see? Well, astrology usually tells you that planets are the things that move. They wander among the stars on the line of the ecliptic. And they were assigned names and traits that generally crossed one culture to the next. Mercury was a symbol for intelligence, Venus for love and compassion, Mars for strength and conflict and war, Jupiter, a teacher or priest, prosperity, Saturn stood for duty, authority, and rules. Now, there's some fundamental problems with astrology. Like most fortune-telling, it can be described as shooting an arrow into a wall and then going and painting a target around it. Astrologers tend to put out predictions in the most general terms. They tell you you will come into money, and when you find a dime on the ground tomorrow, they were right. When they say that you will lose money, and, you get a ticket, they were right. They didn't say how or why or how any of that works. Now, just consider, the case of a daily horoscope. The people on the planet are, they're born on days every day of the year. So roughly a twelfth of the people on the planet were born in the same month. What are the odds that every day 1/12 of the world's population has the exact kind of day? It just doesn't happen. The math does not support it. So what could it be? Could be a planet, a prediction of astrology, or a different event. There was a comet that was recorded in China in 5 BC. That same comet was recorded in 4 BC in Korea. Now, a comet is a fuzzy star. Now, virtually everything in the sky, planets, any light, comets, are stars, wandering stars, shooting stars, whether they're in fact what we know as a star today or not. Now, the comet is recorded to have been seen in the constellation Capricorn. Why is that important, and why is it likely? Well, Caesar, his divinity, was announced by a comet. There was a comet in 44 BC announcing that Julius Caesar became the first Roman god emperor. That comet, Caesar's comet, was visible during the day, the brightest comet on record. The entire world would have seen that one. Now, that makes a good argument that this is an allegorical story to say that Jesus, being King of Kings, would also have needed to had a birth narrative, a virgin birth. Caesar had a comet. How could Jesus have anything less? We also know Halley's Comet is a returning comet on a period of every 72 years, and we know that it came by in 12 BC, which we know it was not this comet because, well, that does not align with one of the census. Could it be something else? If not a comet, how about a nova? Novas are recorded as in history. They do have one in China in 5 BC, and it's an exploding star. The exploding star can happen anywhere in the sky, and in this one it did not happen on the ecliptic. It was in the constellation Aquila. Now that one has remnants. The chances that anyone would interpret one of these to as an astrologer are remote, as most all predictions in astrology occur on the ecliptic, in one of the signs of the zodiac to which they've ascribed meaning. Okay, so if it was a nova like that one, it simply would have no predictive value. Conjunctions. A conjunction is when two objects appear close together in the sky. They happen fairly often, but they can be used by astrologers to point out important events. Now there was one in 6 BC. The astronomer Johannes Kepler discovered this one in 1603 and proposed that this particular conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation Pisces could have been a potential star of Bethlehem. Now he did the math and he said that this event may have happened in 6 BC, but the fact of the matter is conjunctions happen fairly often. And the reason this probably would not make a good argument for the Star of Bethlehem is that a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn occurs every 20 years. So it happened in 26 BC, it happened twice in 7 BC, and it happened in 14 AD. Now, we do know that since the time of Sargon the Great in Babylon, they were making records of all kinds of events as seen in the sky, conjunctions, eclipses, and such. Now, that occurred from 2300 BC to about 70 AD. And all of these used to be in a museum in Baghdad up until the time of the American invasion, where the museum was looted. Only about a third of them had been translated prior to the looting of that museum. So the records that we have do not indicate any event in the right time frame that could have been identified as the Star of Bethlehem. Now, there are other conjunctions. In 1968, an article in Sky and Telescope magazine pointed to this conjunction on June 17th, 2 BC. Here, Jupiter and Venus are so close as to be superimposed upon one another. And this article and the author got quite a bit of notoriety, and he'd done it, of course, in 68 before the use of computers. Now, he also found, that in that time frame, there are no less than 20 similar occurrences. So let's talk about astrology and symbolism. Where the events occur must matter. Different nations have different symbols. In America, we use the bald eagle. You might recognize these other animals as representing other countries. The Persian cat, the Russian bear. The Australian koala bear or the Chinese dragon. Well, Judah had lions out in front of the temple. This would have been quite a spectacle to see a golden lion, much less a set of golden lions out in front of the temple in Jerusalem. So the symbol for the Jewish people could quite easily be the lion. But why would it not be the 2 BC conjunction? The one found in Sky and Telescope. Herod is dead. It happens regularly, and there are 58 conjunctions between 30 BC and 30 AD. It just happens too frequently for that to indicate that the Savior is born in Jerusalem. Now this next conjunction is my own discovery, first brought up to the St. Pete Astronomy Club in 2013. Not well known, but I'd like to point this out. The date is June 12th, 26 BC. What we find is a conjunction of 3 planets around the star Regulus. Now this has some important things that make it a singular event. What we see is the symbols. Venus for love, Saturn for rules and authority, Jupiter for priesthood and prosperity, and Regulus, the little king. How often does this happen, though? Well, Jupiter and Saturn have a conjunction every 20 years. Jupiter and Venus, it's almost an annual event. Saturn and Regulus, about every 30 years. So getting this particular alignment would be once every 78.5 million years. Now, in those time frames, the Earth changes the pole star, and the stars that were on the ecliptic now won't be there then. When the zodiac was made, the constellation of Ophiuchus was not on the ecliptic. It has since moved and taken its place on the ecliptic, and if you look at the dates on your daily horoscope, you will find they no longer represent the time that any of those constellations is actually on the ecliptic line. So with precession, this particular alignment is unique. Now Regulus is the little king. That little king is surrounded by love, duty and authority, royalty, priesthood, and teaching. The problem with this date is that it represents a Jesus who is over 60 at the time of his death. So let's look at these again. Could it have been a comet? Well, it's a little 3 years after the census. Comets are often unique events. Not all comets, like Halley's Comet, come back year after year or in whatever period they are. So its symbolic value completely unknown. There's no particular reason to connect Capricorn with Israel. Halley's Comet, it simply was not that. The years are wrong. It's every 76 years we don't get a new savior, and we have no idea if it had any symbolic value when it did arrive. The Jupiter-Venus conjunction of 2 BC, well, Kepler, it's about 6 years late. It's an annual event, and so it happens regularly. And there's no particular reason that it would have any symbolic value to an astrologer. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction of 7 BC, it was bright and probably worth looking at. It's a little late, not unreasonably so, but it happens every 20 years. And there's no indication from the records we have available to us that anyone made any remarks about it. The particular conjunction the triple conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus with the star Regulus is a unique event. It did happen within 2 years of the census, and the symbolic value pointing to Israel is fairly high. A little king in the Lion of Judah, surrounded by three, nice Trinitarian symbol, three of the planets. So what could it be? Honestly, we don't know. Could it be a story that was made to say that Jesus was at least as good as Caesar, that the stars announced his birth, just as Julius Caesar was announced to be a god? Could it be that there was a conjunction or event that caused Zoroastrians to travel to Israel looking for a Messiah? We simply don't know. And unfortunately, I don't believe we'll be able to say definitively what happened. But thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation on the Star of Bethlehem, Part 3 in the series of Astronomy in the Bible. There is one more in this series, New Testament Astronomy, and at that time we'll make it clear that April 3rd was the date of the first Good Friday. All right. Talk to you then. Bye.